Now I'm going to use the standard Castle colors for this. I'm going to use Castle Gray Dark for the base coat. I'm going to dry brush it with the Castle Gray Medium, and then I'll very, very lightly dry brush it with the Castle Gray Light. You can find the instructions on how to mix these colors on the web page. So I'm going to go ahead and put the base coat on. Now, the base coat is really dark, so you could possibly spray paint this if you wanted to. If you wanted to spray paint this with black paint, this is kind of a stone that you can probably get to all the details with spray paint. So what I'm going to do is I've got my paint, the Castle Gray colors here, and you have to be kind of careful on this. The bridge is very weak right here in the middle when you go to paint this. Let's get these out of the picture for the moment. So when I paint this, I'm going to hang on to it. I'm going to paint one side completely. I'm going to paint the other side completely. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to leave this center section right in here unpainted till the very end. And then once everything else is painted and looked over, I'll go ahead and paint the middle, set it down, let it dry. But basically what you're going to do is you're just going to dip it in there, and you are going to soak it really good with the paint. You're going to jam it in there into all the cracks and really get it down in there. Okay, so at this point I've got everything painted, but you see that there's really a lot of paint on there. You can't even see the detail. So what I will do is I will kind of go over it with the brush, and I will scrape the paint onto the side of the tub to get the excess out of the brush. And then I will go over this and I will mop up all of the drips, because right here in the rail we had a lot of drips right there in the rail, a lot of excess paint that we don't want. Now at this point everything except the middle section is painted, so I will go ahead and paint the middle section and then set it down so it can dry completely. After this first coat is dry, we're going to fill all the little holes we missed. The other one here, I can see a couple of spots here. I can actually see quite a few little dots there that need to be fixed or patched up. To fill these little spots, I'm just going to use a small brush like this. And let's start with right here. I also suggest that you don't have a bright overhead or spotlight on this when you do it, because a lot of times the reflection from the wet paint will look like white spots when it's really not white spots. Okay, at this point the dark undercoat is completely dry. I actually let this dry overnight because this center point was really weak and the glue was starting to want to let go. So I wanted to leave it overnight before I started on the next coat. This next color is the Castle Gray Medium color, and there's instructions on the website about how to mix it. Be sure that it's just mixed up really good. I'm just going to move this out of the way, and we are going to start with the walkway. Since I want the walkway darker, I am only going to use the dark that's on it and the medium gray on top of that, and that'll be it. I'm just going to stop there. So I'm going to start with the walkway. This is all mixed up. And let's go ahead and get with our dry brushing brush here. Okay, the brush that I'm going to use is this one right here. It's about a 3/4 inch wide, but it's really soft and it's kind of long. So that's the brush. And you see it's flared out just a little bit. That's from previous dry brushings. What I'm going to do, and I know it seems a little counterintuitive since you want the brush to be dry, but I'm going to dunk this completely in the water and really soak it. Okay, the reason that I do that is because I want the bristles way up in where it connects here to be wet, because if I don't do that, what's going to happen is if I just use the brush dry, dip it in paint and dry brush it, paint is going to dry way up in the bristles right about here. And if paint dries way up in there and you can't clean it out because it's already dry, the brush is going to go like that, even worse. Okay, it's going to spread out and it's going to destroy your brush a lot quicker. Dry brushing will end up destroying the brush, but you'll get a lot more, use out of it if you wet the bristles first. So the next part is to take a paper towel. I've just got a paper towel folded over, so we got like 2 layers here. And I am going to paint and get rid of as much excess water as I can. I'm going to try to get this brush as dry as I can get it. And no matter how dry I get it, it's still wet back up in here in the bristles, so it won't destroy my brush. So I'm going to start there. And, you know, I think I'm even going to have another paper towel beside it because, you know, there's a lot of water on here. I'll just have this ready. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start with the walkway bridge, and the underside is textured just as well as the upper side. So we're going to practice on the underside that nobody's going to see until we get it just right so we can do the top side. So I'm going to dip the paint in dip the brush in the paint, and I am going to paint out a little bit of paint on the paper towel. Okay. Now I'm going to paint and I'm going to paint and I'm going to paint and try to get a lot of this out of the brush. And this paint it's not straight house paint, it's thinned down a little bit. So if you're using regular cheap acrylic paint, it's probably just about the right consistency. If you use house paint, you're going to have to thin it just a little bit. So let's see what happens if we go on this paper towel here. Okay, I'm seeing a little bit of gray. I think that's going to be just about right. So what I'm going to do is go close up on here, and I'm just going to, I wonder what the best way to do this is. We can get the camera to focus. We'll go like this. Okay, and I'm just going to lightly drag the brush across. And you notice that we're getting streaks on here. That's a little bit much, but I think it's going to be okay because we want to cover most of the surface with the gray. And we're going to go really, really lightly on this. And as this brush dries out, it's going to get a little bit better. Now, I know it's going to look a little stark here, but remember, paint always dries a little darker than when you first see it. So I'm going to go ahead and go with this. And I'm going to just, you know, kind of paint over and paint over. And it looks to me like I've got it probably just about right for the undercoat that I'm going to do. And you're going to notice that we're getting most of the gray everywhere. Let's see, be sure I'm in the camera still. And now I can kind of push a little bit more. Now it looks like it's kind of turning everything gray, but the gray is not going down into the deepest cracks. I think what we've got here is probably pretty good, and if we go over it more and more, it's slowly going to get lighter and lighter. Now, this was a practice. I think it's pretty close. I think it's maybe a little bit too much gray. I think I needed to take a little more paint out, but that's why I did it on the bottom. I think at this point, my brush is just about perfect. I think at this point, my brush is about perfect. So let's look at the other side. And let's lightly go over it. Now, you see when I go over it, I don't get those streaks. Those streaks aren't happening as much. So now, I'm a little bit freer to push a little bit harder on this. I can push a little bit harder on this and actually get the paint to go where I want. Now, I do want to keep this kind of dark, but what I want are a lot of different shades. In other words, I don't want two colors. I don't want dark gray and medium gray. I want this medium gray to go over it thinly, so that the dark color transmutes through it. So the more times I brush over it, the more layers of thin paint go on it, and the more variety of colors and shades I'm going to get between the dark gray and the light gray that I'm putting on. So I'm just going to keep doing this. I think I've got the brush just about perfect right now. Just about perfect. Okay. So I think I'm going to go with that. And by the way, when you're doing this, don't forget the ends. You know, the ends are there too, and you're going to see those. So don't forget to get the ends. Now, as far as the sides, I don't care because it's going to be glued against the bridge. But I think what I've got right here is pretty good. Once again, let's start on the inside. We're going to start on the inside of the bridge. And notice my brush is kind of running out of paint at this point. I'm going over it a lot, but I'm not getting a lot of paint on there. So at this point, I'm going to get a little more paint on the brush, put a little more on the paper towel. I'm going to paint off some of that excess on the paper towel, get rid of the excess, and then we're going to lightly go over it. That looks about right. So I'm going to lightly go over that. And once I get rid of most of the excess paint off of it, I don't want to jam in until I get rid of a lot of the excess of that paint. So now I'm onto the outside. I think I got the brush just about right where I want it. Now I can actually push down and jab a little more into the surface than I could have, and I can kind of get a nice thin layers of paint on it. So I think that is going to work out. That is going to work out pretty good. Yeah, this paint is acting like I want it to. So once again, I'm going to do the top edge here. And notice this really isn't taking a whole lot of time. Now, you might want to take a look at the sides, because like right here on this side, I didn't get that. Right here on this side, I didn't get that because I just wasn't kind of paying attention. And I don't know if you noticed, but the underside of the bridge, I totally missed that. I don't know if people are going to see that or not. Chances are they won't care. It'll be sitting on a table. You'll never see it. But so we're going to go and look over all of the sides of the piece and make sure that you get everything. Now for our final dry brush coat, we're going to use the Castle Gray light color. Only we're going to go really, really lightly and just highlight the edges. So, as I mentioned before, we're going to leave the floor dark. We're not going to put dry brush of white on it because we want a little bit of difference between the floor and the wall. So I'm going to set that aside. So once again, we're going to do the same thing. I'm going to wet the brush, get water all the way down into the bristles. Get water all the way down, and then we are going to wipe as much of that water out of the brush, and it will get the rest of the brush dry, but it won't dry up way back in the bristles where it's going to harm the brush. So we've got that, and we're also going to grab one more. Once again, we're going to grab a second range of paper towels here. So we're going to dip this a little bit in the very light, and we're going to get some light paint on here. And it's a little harder to see it on the paper towel because it's a white paper towel and you got light gray. Maybe the video will pick that up a little better. I don't know. We'll see. Okay, so once I've got that, and I'm going to dry brush, and I'm going to get most of it out. So we've got a good amount of paint on here. I would try this on the inside rather than on the outside here. So let me get this out of the way so we can see what we're doing. So I'm just going to very lightly brush over this, and we are going to lightly hit the highlights. So I am barely using any pressure at all, and you can see what that's doing right there. You see the difference? It's just frosting the edges. And you want the paint to be fairly thin, and you want to go really, really lightly, because I only want to bring out the edges and the real highlights. And that, I think, is working really nicely. If your paint is too thick on this white, you're going to be making it look like Kellogg's Frosted Flakes, okay? You don't want that. You don't want to frost it so much that it looks like snow has hit it. You want to, this paint is still fairly thin so that when it dries a little bit darker and it mutes a little bit. Now, I'm still a little hesitant as to go into the rails yet. I think there's still a little too much paint on this brush to go into the rail. So what I'm probably going to do is I am going to start on the underside of the second one, and I am going to do it the same way. I'm going to lightly brush over it, just lightly, and it looks like it's starting to act just a little bit better. I'm seeing a lot of detail there. That looks like it's actually working pretty well there. So I'm going to, at this point, flip it over, and I'm going to go on the side that everybody's going to see. So now there's a little bit less paint in the brush. I can push a little bit more on the brush to try to get a little more paint in there, and I can push to get kind of down into the rails, because before I couldn't push, or I would get, blanket of white everywhere. But since the paint is dried up a little bit, and since the paint is kind of left the brush, I can now actually push in a little bit on the rail area, and I can get a little bit of this paint down into the rails without it really frosting it over white. Okay, so that one looks like it's pretty good. I think I'm able to get into the rails really nicely, and while it's acting nice, I am going to get into this rail as well. So I'm going to push it into this rail, and I'm going to try to frost that over a little bit, and it's going to lighten that up, and it's going to give me lots of different shades, but it's mainly to get the edges really lightly there. Okay, now while this is still acting good, top of the rails are last, because it's really going to hit the edges, and I just want the edges to pop. I want to outline it like Christmas lights, just a little bit on the top of the rail. And you can see, like on this rail right here, do you see how it's it's kind of like dark in the middle and then it's light on the edges. That's kind of the thing you want there. You want to kind of do that. Don't forget to get the very ends. You know, the ends are part of it too. See, here's the walkway, and here's this. There is a difference in the light and darkness of that. So when I put these together, you'll notice that the walkway bridge is a little bit darker. It makes it stand out. Okay, our final step here is to glue the bridge together, and that's probably like the easiest step of this whole project. So be sure you use a lot of glue. So what I'm going to do is just a lot of glue going around this edge, because it may not necessarily be hitting on flat spots on the inside, because the inside is a little bit uneven. And I'm going to put a really nice bit of glue over on this side. There we go. There, that's that. And so we're going to set this down here, and I am going to try to get this right in the middle, so I can kind of take just like a good guess as to where middle is going to be. And then I'm just going to press the two together and leave it dry. To be sure that both ends have equal distance on both ends, and that both ends are kind of straight across.